shows you how you can. But yeah, so for everyone, you can select the Arabic channel, and then you will hear everything translated into Arabic. If you prefer the English channel, you can select the English channel. And if anyone would speak in Arabic, it will automatically be translated to English for you. If you have any issues with the technicalities of this event, you can let it be known in the chat, and then one of our colleagues will assist you and try to help you solve the problem. As you can see now, the instructions for selecting the interpretation are shared. So indeed, at the bottom, there's the globe, and you can select this and then select which channel you prefer, so English or Arabic. That's the first practical announcement. Then the second one, and probably you've already heard it, this meeting will be recorded. If you have objections to being in this recording, we ask you to put your video off. But if you don't have any objections of showing your face, we would very much welcome you to do so, also if the internet allows, of course. But yeah, we would be very happy to see your face, because also then on a distance we can feel connected. And yeah, so we very much welcome you to keep your video open. On the other hand, we do ask you to keep your microphone off, so that we can manage the sound and there's no interferences there, and we can make it a very clear event for everyone. I think that's all for the technical announcements from our side. Then we're very keen to hear where you are connecting from. So we want to ask everyone to introduce yourself in the chat. And I see some of you already started this. So Diana, I see you very, you introduced yourself. You put the place where you're based right now in Palestine. Welcome. If everyone can do something like that, so you just put your name and the country you're connecting from, then we will compose it together to see all the different places that we're based right now and connecting. Hi, Amina, welcome. Then thirdly, before we continue with the content of this session, we're very happy that everyone is connecting from all over the world for this alumni event. It's been 1.5 years since we launched the Alumni Network, and we're very happy to see your participation also in this. So we also want to encourage you to post things on the Alumni Network. Maybe you want to bring back some memories, want to post some pictures from the training you've had here in The Hague or in your country, or maybe you've seen an interesting publication that might be interesting also for colleagues that work on the same subject. Maybe you've seen interesting events. Maybe there's a question you want to reflect upon with alumni from the Hague Academy. So you're very welcome to post things there, and then we want to make it a very interactive platform for everyone. And talking of the interactive platform, I also want to share with you that we'll be sharing our impact survey that we do each year. We'll be sharing it, I think next week, Pablo.
This is the alumni survey that we did.
Yeah.
On how you view democracy in your contexts. This will be shared in the coming weeks. So make sure to follow our pages. And of course, in the Alumni Network, you can also see the report when it's published.
Yeah. And I think that's, and of course, if you haven't signed up yet, I see my colleague Hermione has posted the link to the Alumni Network. So please do join our Alumni Network, because we're very interested in having you on board as an alumni of the Hague Academy. Yeah, then we're going to go over the program with Pablo.
Indeed, we are. So now that we have discussed the practical matters, we can move ahead to this event, which basically the main topic is global democracy, local democracy, and how to defend it. In 2 years after the pandemic, or 1.5, we can see that global democracy has been in decline. There's been a lot of autocratization, but there's also been a lot of people who are discontent with how democracy is doing in recent years. One of the reasons is because of the pandemic itself, but also because of rising populism. We can also see a rise of governments who try to shut down free media. But today, we want to talk about these contexts and actually talk about how we can defend democracy from these autocratic slides. So we want to hear from local initiatives, not only from our experts and alumni here with us in The Hague, but also from you who are online. We want to make sure that we talk about the positive contributions worldwide and that we continue focusing on the positives while being realistic that we have to work on democracy. So let me take you through the program so you know what to expect in this online event. After this welcome and introduction, we will have a conversation round with 3 alumni from the Hague Academy. During this conversation, we will share their experience and their knowledge, and there will also be a possibility to exchange with you online. Should you want to contribute, so just send your question through the chat, and then we will pick out a few names and ask you to then ask your question in person. After this round, our colleague Lars Burema, maybe you know him from our citizen course. He's also one of our team managers at the Hague Academy. He will share a citizen participation tool with all of us, because we all know that citizen participation is one of the keys in defending democracy. So without any further ado, I would like to present Cameron. Cameron is joining us all the way from Kurdistan, part of Iraq. We have Irma, who's joining us. She is an Indonesian citizen. And we have Biford, who is online, and he is joining us all the way from Liberia. Biford, maybe you can unmute yourself and just say a quick hello.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone.
Hi, thank you for joining us. So without any further ado, Willeke, please open the round.
I actually realized that we didn't introduce ourselves. So maybe we need to start with that because of course, you know, like we are very active behind the scenes on the Alumni Network, but probably not all of you may know us. So my name is Willeke van Leeuwen. If you want, and many participants do, you can call me Vicky because I know that's way easier to pronounce. And yeah, I've been with the Hague Academy for 2.5 years now. I work on OT migration and OT conflict next to Shiraka Social Affairs. I've seen quite some alumni of social affairs also, so welcome everyone and good to see you.
My name is Pablo. That's much easier than my whole name. I am from Aruba, an island in the Caribbean. My whole family is from Mexico. And I've also met some of you in the chat. I saw Biwar, I see Iyad as well. I saw quite a lot of other names, Huda as well. I think we've met. I've worked on Shiraka ecosystems for entrepreneurship. I've also worked on local economic development and on the gender course and quite a few other courses. And of course, I'm also part of the Alumni Network. So we're very happy to see you here. And I'll take this moment to quickly ask our colleagues whether the map is ready to show where you are all coming from. Let's see, because you all wrote in the chat that you're coming from different places. I see Nepal, Jordan, Iraq, Burundi, Oman. Let's see. No. Hi, Biwar. Happy to see you as well. Let's see. A few more seconds and we can look at where we're coming from. And then we'll go into the conversation, of course. Yeah. Bangladesh is also here. Pakistan is also here. Yes. All right. So we see there's quite a concentration in the North Africa, Middle East region, but also Southeast Asia. I think because of the time zone, we don't have anyone in Colombia right now because it's in the morning. We have people from the UK. This is a nice spread that we have. Nepal is well represented, of course. Lebanon as well.
Indonesia, of course.
Indonesia as well.
Yeah, your support is there.
Keep on sending where you're coming from, and we'll add it to the map, and we can also publish it later in our alumni network.
Yes.
So without any further ado, Willeke?
Yeah. So now we'll go into our panel discussion. As Pablo just mentioned earlier, you're very welcome to put your questions that you have to our alumni speakers in the chat. We'll try to get a few of your questions in the panel discussion as we go. So you can just ask them and we'll light a few out when it's a good moment for that. However, during the first round, we'll not take questions because it's more about contextualization of your background, basically. We're very happy to have you all with us. Maybe I can start with you, Irma. Can you maybe introduce yourself? Who are you? Where you're from? What do you do in daily life? And what organization do you work for?
Okay, thank you, Willeke. Thank you, Pablo. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's very lovely to see you and to be here. I'm really excited. So originally, I'm from Indonesia. My name is Irma Nugrahanti. Feel free to call me Irma. I'm currently doing a PhD in ISS in The Hague. So my research is about gender responsive governance and also climate change crisis. So how to mitigate climate change crisis through gender lens. So, and I've been working also at nonprofit sector for over a decade, and I'm really passionate about women empowerment, democracy, local governance, and policy advocacy. So yeah, I hope I can bring some insights from my observation and experience here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe we can continue online. Biefert, you want to take over, introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you so much. And I appreciate being here today. But I was just looking at the map there, even though I'm from Liberia, and I didn't see a dot on Liberia on the map. So.
We should add Liberia.
Okay, I'm Bifokwi from Liberia, West Africa, and I hold a master's degree in public sector management from the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. Currently, I work at the Liberia Institute of Public Administration as a training specialist, a position I assumed a few days ago. At the Hague Academy, which I really loved, and all my time what it was, I really enjoyed. I did 2 courses there. I studied 2 courses, which were the local economic development and local economic development. That was in 2019, and also I did the fiscal decentralization and local finance, and that was also in 2022. These courses significantly improved my career. They have helped me a lot to the extent that they made me to really have deep expertise when it comes to how to work with the local government. Just a few days ago, I came to town. For the past years, I used to be in the local areas, working with the local government there, helping local businesses, and making sure that they have the businesses or the technical idea and the expertise they need to be able to raise revenue. And those revenue, when they raise revenue, they are able to pay taxes back to the government. So those are the initiatives we're on. Basically, we're really about our decentralization process. So I was deeply involved. Since indeed I'm from the government side, I was assigned there to help them. And that really worked. But based on my work, I was able to be brought to town to also help with the system here in town as well.
That's great.
So I'm very happy to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome. Yeah, happy to have you also, even from a distance, of course. Then
Thank
finally,
you.
but not least, of course, Kamara.
First of all, thank you so much for organizing this, and I would say Ramadan Mubarak for those who observe fasting in the Middle East and across the world, and thank you again. My name is Kamran Palani. I first came to The Hague in 2016. I took a course on citizen participation and inclusive governance, but that was not my first and last engagement with the Dutch Institute. And then I studied PhD at Leiden University. I took more courses here in The Hague and at other institutions. These days, I'm based in Erbil. Erbil is the capital of the Kurdistan region of Iraq. I teach at a public university. I teach political science and international relations. I work as a researcher with a local think tank called Middle East Research Institute in Erbil. I do research, I do advocacy, policy advocacy, training. I do several activities in areas around governance and peace building in the context of Iraq and broader Middle East.
Fantastic. I think same as every other alumni that we have online, I'm sure you're all super engaged in many different initiatives, such as our alumni here. We can be very proud of all of you because you've done a lot since you came to our courses. So getting into the subject matter, I'm going to start with Cameron because we finished with you. Can you tell us a bit about the history or the context and what's happening right now in terms of democracy in Iraq, or specifically in Kurdistan area?
Thank you. You know, the timing of this event is very interesting because in this week, it's the 20th anniversaries of the regime change in Iraq. So it was 20 years ago, the regime change took place in the country. So democracy as a political, as a system of governance was very much brought through external invasion to the country. it was not a gradual process of governance and decision making in the country. So when democracy was introduced to the country, Iraq did not have structures conducive to democratization, such as universities, education system, families, political parties were not really designed to address democracy. So it was quite a challenge to the country. But over the past 20 years, so we have witnessed positive and negative trends towards democracy. And I would say, despite all the challenges of the past 20 years in the country, there is still support to democracy as a model of governance in the country. Because Iraq is a very, I can see many colleagues from Kurdistan, from other parts of Iraq. Iraq is a very diverse country in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, in terms of cultural, linguistic differences. So the only model to govern these diversities in a peaceful way for many people, it is a democracy. But I have to say it again, over the past, because the structure was not in place in 2003, so the country went through a very, very difficult transition, and the difficulty is still there.
Thank you, Cameron. Shall we go over to Irma?
Yeah, do you find maybe you can connect a bit also to what Cameron is saying? Like, do you find similarities there, or maybe like opposites, like differences?
Yeah, I think as Indonesian, from what I observed after Indonesia gained independence from the Dutch colony in 1945, after 350 years, we've been having significant political and government transitions and changes. So in 1965, we had an authoritarian regime, and we had a president who ruled over Indonesia over 3 decades, so for 32 years. And at that time, democracy was not a case. It was really, really difficult. We had only several political parties, and it was mainly controlled by the government. We had corruption, nepotism, something like that, lack of freedom of speech and media. And then in 1998, we had a reformation, and we finally had democracy in place. And that's when we started to have more political parties, more freedom of speech, media were no longer controlled by the government. So we tried to figure things out. However, there were still, democracy is never a straightforward process. Democracy, sometimes you can take 10 steps forward and then 20 steps back, right? So it's a continuous cycle and require participation from all parties, not just the citizens, but also the government, CSO. It's multi-partnership, really. And yeah, so I can relate with your situation, because for me, I don't believe that we are now in a perfect democracy level. We still have a lot of homework, and I think that public trust is something that is still lacking in Indonesia, and inclusive governance as well. So really about, if you ask about healthy local democracy, I believe that it requires active citizen participation and transparency, also to hold the elected officials accountable for their actions.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you already mentioned a lot of interesting things also, of course, when we're going to go deeper into like what are the threats to democracy in your country like today. But before we continue, Buford, can you maybe also tell a bit more about democracy in Liberia, what the current status is and how it got there?
Okay, so okay, thank you. I think they've said it all, because when it comes to democracy, there are series of activities. Like you said, it's not an event, it's a process. But Liberia, over the years, Liberia is considered actually the older independent country in Africa, but our democracy has a lot of controversy. And like she said, I just want to add my voice to her. But you notice that from the 1940s, between 1940 and 2003, our head of state at the time in Liberia, the president, they were autocratic, right? They were not. The democratic process in Liberia is not how it is now. people during those days, they feel that since for the fact that they were president, they dictate to the citizens, they tell them how they want things to be, right? So you notice that, and there was not information sharing, the issue of rule of law, value for human rights, all these things were not valued at the time, because they felt that there were people who were educated and the indigenous, they didn't know anything, so to speak. So they were like only playing on the mind of the locals. But the locals said they have issue with it, because democracy means different things for different people. Because if you were to look at Indonesia, the context of democracy in Indonesia could be far different from the context in Liberia, right? So for which you will see from 1944 to 2003, all of our presidents, they did not end their tenures peacefully. Usually, sometimes you see coup d'etat and sometimes you see fighting and all of that. And that also led to a process of 14 years of war in Liberia. It took away over 300,000 lives, because there was not a democracy to make people to be a part of the process, to make them to give their views, to things that are really bothering them, right? How they want things to be. So it's like they just make laws, or they come up with policy and up there, and they don't allow the indigenous to come in with their opinion as well. So you notice that the indigenous, they were having issues, they were having problems. So if you have problems and you try to communicate it to the government doesn't listen at the time. Mm-hmm. So it was a very serious problem. Only it was just literally 2005 that we start to have a change in dynamics when it comes to how democracy is supposed to be, because we have some international partners who have come from the US, the Europe and other places that come to help us, to make our leaders to understand how democracy actually is supposed to be led. There should be effective rule of law. There should be development activity for young people. There should be plans when it comes to social protection for people. But all of these things, because it was lacking at the time, so there was a series of uprising, and there were things that were not controlled at the time.
Yeah.
Before, I appreciate everything that you said, but specifically two made me think of some things connected to our following question as well. But Civicus, an organization that focuses on civil freedoms, they published a report of democracy and basically how the public spaces are in the last few years. And they mentioned that, one of the most important things to notice is that no matter how democratization or autocratization is happening, it's always the local people who are the ones that have to fight for it, or have to voice their opinions and say what they expect from a democracy. So even if the government on top was saying one thing, as long as the people are really fighting and participating, that's something that really lights the fire of democracy, And also you mentioned that, democracy doesn't mean the same for everyone, which brings us to our next point. What does democracy then mean to you? Perhaps we'll start with you before.
Okay, so that's a good question. I love that. Today, if you log onto the internet and browse, you see a long list of definition and description when it comes to definition democracy, and in different contexts, right? Democracy goes beyond just a peaceful election and smooth transition of power from one government to another, right? To me, democracy means making sure that those elements, right, responsible for maintaining sustainable peace, value for human rights, empowerment provision, sustainable youth development programs, rapid social protection system, openness in society, effective rule of law system, and justice for the poor, and making sure that everybody is a part of the process, right? I think that's how democracy should be led.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can ask you a tricky question, before, if you would have to give it one word, what would it be?
Democracy should be inclusiveness.
Inclusiveness.
No. Does that connect a bit to what does democracy mean to you, Kamaran?
I would say, first of all, it's not, there is not one universal model of democracy in general in governance. I would say in the context where I work, where I come from, I would say democracy is an inclusion and recognition of local diversity and their accommodation into decision-making and governance. Why I say this, because Iraq from the very beginning was ruled through a very centralized way. So not addressing, not including internal and local legitimacy questions into the governance. It was very much a very centralized model. So for me, local democracy or democracy in general is a recognition of of different identities and diversities, and their accommodation into decision making and local governments.
Yeah. Before we continue on to you, Irma, I want to remind everyone that from now on, you're more than welcome to write questions if you have. I see already Gerald posted a question. Anyone is allowed to please place your questions in the chat and we will ask you to unmute. But for now, we'll turn to Irma and see if you resonate with these two answers.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pablo. Before, and Cameron also mentioned about inclusion and diversity. So I feel that's one of the biggest part of democracy is the how you include people whose basic interests are affected by the government policy or government regulation, right? How do you engage them, not only in the beginning stage where you design the policies, but also how do they can still give their feedback and help to monitor the government or the policies after it's being implemented. So I think it's also how to be aware and how to protect the marginalized groups' rights and interests. So we are not only catering to one particular group or majority, but also to make sure that I think democracy is equality. Democracy is a pathway to lead to a just society.
I really like also what you say, like not just at the beginning,
Yeah.
also like during and after, because like it tends to be focused a lot on the beginning.
Yeah.
And then indeed when you talk
Correct.
also earlier about accountability, you know, that's also an important part of.
Correct.
Yeah.
And many, sorry to add about that. So like citizen participation shouldn't just to tick a box, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes people's like, yeah, we include the local people during this discussion of the policy, but then what's more, it's not just about output, but how you make sustainable outcome and actually transforming the society.
Yeah,
Exactly.
very much.
May I propose to take the question that our colleague Gerald posted? Perhaps we can also invite Gerald for you to unmute and you can ask your question directly. Of course, this is supposed to be a very inclusive and open conversation. So please unmute and perhaps even show your camera.
Thank you so much. And good morning, evening, midday, everyone, for attending this wonderful alumni event. Nice discussions going on. So, Bedford, thank you so much for sharing with us the positive changes that have happened in the Liberian context. We are aware also, I think, the struggle Liberia has gone through to be where you are today. So hearing the positive stories is always nice. And knowing that also the Hague Academy in very small ways has contributed to empowering a Liberian like you to continue with the journey for democracy in your country, that's really heartwarming to hear. So my question is, considering that history that you have just shared with us, and of course the challenges of transition from autocracy, dictatorship to the current space that you have right now in terms of democracy. I'm just curious, because there seems to be a relative calm and peace in Liberia right now. What is the normal or general understanding of the Liberians in terms of democracy? And when you think about sustainable democracy, I'm talking about, we hope the calm that we see can sustain or even improve in future. Does their current understanding of Liberian democracy match what we would call sustainable democracy for the future?
Thank you, Gerald, for a question. Before it's up to you.
Okay, so I love that question. It's very good. Let me just say, you know, Liberian parlance, sometimes when you are doing wrong, right? Sometimes you don't know that what you are doing is wrong until somebody tells you what you are doing is wrong, right? And when you accept, that's the time you are able to move forward. But if you refuse to accept what you are doing that is very wrong, wherever people tell you about, if you don't accept it, then it means that you are going nowhere. For Liberia, we had, like you just said, we have series of war, 14 years in this war that took over 300,000 lives in Liberia. But with the help of the international community, especially with the UN and other partners, they have come ready to provide some programs, right, that were able to help over the years. Even though for now, Liberia, I will not tell you that our democracy is 100% no. it's still a little fragile because it's like people are still, are still being sensitized about how we're supposed to live, how we're supposed to respect each other, and where your right starts and where it ends, when the next man right starts from and where it ends as well. We all, and it's something we have to do gradually until most people. For the past, I can say almost 15 or 16 years, so we have not heard gun sound in Liberia. So that means that we are going somewhere, even though it's not 100% yet. But I think we are traveling somewhere small with the help of other people. Like some of the programs at first, we never used to go out to go for study, to go for training program, to listen to the context of other people and see how they have transitioned from certain system to another. But for now, there are a lot of Liberians have gone out, and we have some international partner coming to Liberia, telling us, look, this is, you do it this way. If you need peace, you need this, you need that, because war in itself, it delays everybody. Right, so we are trying small now, but it's not like how yours is.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Beeford, for clarifying your point of view to Gerald's question. Propose we continue with the next round of.
Sorry, I really want to intervene because there was something mentioned in the chat, and I like that Iyad mentioned. Sorry, if I can ask my colleague if she can scroll a little bit up in the chat so we can see it. Yeah, there. So he mentioned for him, democracy is freedom to choose, freedom of expression, freedom to participate, and be held accountable. And I think that is something that we sometimes forget to add, the dimension of accountability, because it's not only that you have freedoms, but you also have things to do as a citizen, right? You're also accountable for the choices, and not only government, right? We cannot only demand, we must also be held accountable. I wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting perspective indeed, and well, of course it can be, because Irma, you already mentioned accountability in your story. Like the next question is about, okay, what are the threats to democracy? In your question, is accountability one of them or not per se?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think we certainly could improve our accountability part in an Indonesian democracy system right now. So what I observed that there is kind of a trend where opposition party start to join the cabinet, which creates kind of like a lack of accountability, because check and balance control from the opposition party is no longer there, or is it weakening, So I think it's important to still be an active citizen by giving your participation, your monitoring, your elected officials, the government. If you see something, say something, and give your constructive feedback. So I think, that's absolutely right and crucial. Accountability is really important to be able to have a healthy, sustainable democracy.
Yeah. Now you say something about accountability. In Iraq, it's very fundamental to mention that most of power, as well as decisions, are made outside the scope and reach of the official government institutions. So most of our initiatives and our programs, and also the existing knowledge, are very useful to talk about accountability with official institutions. But in the context of Iraq, which is defined by a hybrid governance, it's very difficult to hold actors accountable, which they don't think their powers come from local legitimacy, from local elections. And this is, for me, this is the biggest challenge to democracy in Iraq.
That's
so the informal power, basically, as in like not the elected.
Exactly, and and these are not just individuals but they have armed organizations. They have their own economics, sustainability. They don't much depend on local and domestic, as well as popular legitimacy and support. This is where I think most of the challenges come from in our context, in our work.
Yeah, that's very clear.
That becomes very difficult when you cannot see the strings that are pulling the game together, and that you cannot pull them either because they're invisible to some degree.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this something as well that can be seen in Liberia in this case? Is accountability one of the biggest issues, or what would you see as the biggest threat to democracy?
Okay, so thank you so much. Before I get to the thread, let me just say something about accountability. Usually, when it comes to accountability, sometimes some people just look at it on the side of finance to say how you use public fund, you have to account for it, and what did you do with it? What report can you give? But accountability goes way beyond that. The reason is that no, let's take for instance like Liberia, right? We just from war not too long. So if you were to have somebody who want to come and bring about riot or chaos, or bring about a situation where people will go into head-to-scatter and running again, you should be accountable for it. Yes, you should be actually be accountable for it, because it's like sometimes these things, if you don't hold people accountable for certain things, something and you allow them to go with impunity, it also give rise to other people doing theirs too as well. Right. So to me, that's how. So for the question when it comes to the bigger threat, when it comes to defending democracy in Liberia, I have a picture there on I think maybe you can put on you can see a picture. The first one, the journalist.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be pulled up as we speak.
Okay, the first one. Okay, so okay, good. It says stop beating journalists, right? So as you see it here, one of our biggest challenges we have, some of our biggest challenges we have in Liberia in terms of promoting democracy is that we do not have 100% of freedom of speech, freedom of information. Our media, they don't have that 100% support or that ability to be able to give the information that the public will need, right? Because the issue is that not everybody has the opportunity to be able to speak, right, to the public that everybody will hear, but sometimes their voices can be heard through the media.
Yeah.
Yes, their voices can be heard through the media. The next one is that our government that they don't build strong partnership with civil society organizations.
Yeah. Oh, there's someone speaking. Sure, our colleagues will mute them. Thank you, Buford. I think this is not only Liberia, actually, but there are plenty of reports that show that one of the biggest issues worldwide to democracy is actually the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. And it's not only in the African continent or in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia, in Mexico as well, in South America, everywhere around the world, even in the Netherlands, it's starting to become an issue. And it's something that we have to, as we say in Dutch, we have to keep checking our pulse and see how that's actually going. We have to monitor it.
And I was actually thinking, because you mentioned public trust when you were describing the context of Indonesia, I think that's also indeed, if we also compare the Dutch context to the context that you all have described, public trust is also a major issue here. So I think, yeah, we have already defined so many different issues and so many things at stake. Maybe before we continue to if initiatives defending democracy, are there any threats you feel like I actually also want to highlight that one or point it out or connect to something that a colleague has said?
I can again reiterate how important it is to involve gender balance to make sure that women's voice are listened and our interests are represented in policy making and also other form of democracy process, because usually as a Indonesian woman and also feminist, from my experience and observation, women have been marginalized politically and socially in Indonesia, and we can do better. And women are not only just agent of change, we are not just holding knowledge, but we also have skills and tools to be leaders. And when you leave women in the society, immediately you will leave the whole community. So I will say include women, give them access, participate them, interact with them, and start to give them equal and just remove all these stereotypes and norms, barriers.
Yeah. No, we totally agree. I mean, women make up 50% of the world as well, so it only also makes sense in that sense to involve them, but also, like you say, being part of the family as well, we men should also play a crucial role and also take up those roles that women traditionally have taken up. because only in an equal society will we arrive at the equality we're searching for.
Yeah, reverse that gender roles.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I saw that there was a hand up. I don't know if we perhaps want to take a question before we move on to the initiatives and we start talking about more positive aspects of defending democracy.
In the meantime, I can mention that I've seen, Abdallah, I've seen your question about how can civil society organizations also add to defending democracy, and that is something we touch upon in a moment. Let us quickly scroll through the other questions that came in.
Well, I would like to ask someone who asked a question about Tunisia, actually, because Tunisia is one of the most recent. I mean, minute to minute, things are changing. I just don't see your name. Yes.
Idris.
So Idris, we would like to invite you to unmute. We are in a time crunch, so we will give you about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But please do share with us what are the current threats to democracy in Tunisia. If you want to unmute, of course.
The situation in Tunisia is also important to the broader Middle East.
Exactly.
In terms of hope for democracy and as well as because the Arab Spring started there.
So it's let me see. No, so you would like to not talk? That is okay. Then we will maybe ask.
Yeah, well, we can actually continue with Abdallah's question because it also connects well to what we wanted to continue talking about is, what are local initiatives that are defending democracy in your country? And maybe Kamaran, you want to kick off?
I mean, I would say something because democracy brought to the country in 2003. It was also the moment where local civil society started to emerge and consolidate. So most of the civil society activists in Iraq and in Kurdistan are not just members of representatives of local civil society, but are influencing the shape because it is emerging space in the country. It is emerging local civil society organizations emerging in the country. But what I have said earlier, these organizations are very effective in working with official recognized institutions because this is where their training, knowledge, but as well as engagement with international partners and organizations come from. But when it comes to, for example, when they protest, they will be facing groups which are very difficult to deal with. So local civil society is emerging, I would say, is one of the positive trends in the country, across the country. And the whole crisis of ISIS in 2014, I would say also gave an opportunity to local civil society because then international organizations came to the country, supported local initiatives. So there are many useful, effective local initiatives working with youth, working with women, working with vulnerable communities in the country. I can mention many of them. But I would say one thing is that local civil society is also, it can be also destabilizing because this is a very controversial statement. When we promote them, when we support them, they will face the groups that I've just mentioned, that what before said, democracy means different things to different people, is an opportunity for some, but also is a threat to some people. So we have to be careful that the emergence of local civil society does not mean that it will lead to local stability. It may also lead to confrontation with groups who are not interested in
because of course in the end the disturbing the status quo that is and that rebalances and I see your point. I was thinking like because you mentioned you know many local initiatives, is there maybe a very concrete one that the first one that pops into your mind that is
I would say there was a project funded by the Dutch Foreign Ministry. It was implemented by Spark. It's a Dutch organization, but I would say it's also a local organization. The way they have worked, the way they have set their programs, it was very successful initiative. They supported youth activists throughout the Kurdistan region. They gave them training, etc., about countering misinformation and countering hate speech. This is, I would say, in addition to the armed organizations. The second most important challenge to local democracy in Iraq is misinformation produced by powerful organizations.
Yeah.
So mobilizing youth, training them, working with them to counter the hate speech narrative, I think was one of the successful initiatives we saw in Kurdistan, and it can be translated and expanded and extended to other parts of the country.
Yeah.
So what I want to say in one sentence is that it is not, as you say, democracy is not straightforward. It's not like either we have democracy or no democracy.
Mhm.
There are sectors like organizations, actors work very well, make a progress. There are sectors, it's like 20 steps back. So it is very difficult to mention. It's very important to mention that there are different parts of the equation that we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And all of these different parts and putting them together. I was thinking, Biford, Kamaran just mentioned the example of hate speech and misinformation that is also a big threat in his country. Of course, you just spoke about freedom of speech in your country. Can you maybe mention local initiatives that you have in mind that defend democracy? Maybe in that regard, but can also be on a different threat, maybe?
Yeah, okay, so thank you for that. I love that. The democracy process in Liberia now is everybody's business now in Liberia. We all have to hold it from all angles to make it work. Defending democracy, or when it comes to how democracy is being looked at in Liberia now, one of the key areas that we are putting our attention to now, especially our government in partnership with other organizations, is freedom of information, and for which and this process actually we were helped by the Carter Center, which is an American NGO, helped to design our Freedom of Information Act that was in 2010, and after the signing of this act, even my own institution, NIPA, right, is also involved with the issue of freedom of information. So that is at my institution we have a course that talks about freedom of information. So that is I'm one of the facilitators who is also helping to train civil servants from government ministry agency and some youth organizations, right, in terms of how we can raise the awareness when it comes to freedom of information in the community, how we as civil servant or government employees, how we are accountable to the public when it comes to information. The reason is from somebody, it means that you are keeping knowledge away from them. And when you are keeping knowledge away from them, it means that there is certain thing they need to have, right, that you are not giving them. Yes. So if I need something from you, or if you are supposed to give me something, right, it means that you are supposed to inform me as to how I'm to do it and what I'm entitled to. It is only information that can make you to understand that. So for now in Liberia, the information, the Freedom of Information Initiative is why my institution is deeply involved. And so we go into communities. Sometimes we talk with community leaders and tell them, look, if we have any issue when it comes to how the public need to know about this thing, make them to understand. When it comes to the national budget, what the public need to know, make sure you give them the information. When it comes to retrieval of information, when it comes to whatever is really affecting them, right, gather the information and bring it to the government and see how we can sit around the table to discuss their plight. It's good for them to be a part of the priority setting, process as well, because it's like if you ask people from information dissemination, then it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot, because sometimes it's like you live there in darkness, and once people are in darkness in terms of what they're supposed to know, then they start to think other way. They start to create dark cloud over everybody. And sometimes a small problem from just a small group of people, sometimes because of the lack of information, sometimes it affects the entire community. Sometimes when the community get affected, sometimes it affects the larger society. So we are working, in this very hard to see how we can train government employees, train local leaders, train those who are responsible in the media, how they are to carry out the information as well. Because sometimes even the information sharing as well, if you are not careful with information sharing as well, you also create chaos in the society as well. So these are some of the things we are involved with. So We have a certificate program, some diploma program, sometimes for some 3 months, sometimes 4 months. It depends on the level of the understanding of the participant that will be involved sometimes. So that's how we can design the training materials. So that's an initiative that we are involved in. I'm also one of the facilitators at DIPA here as well. So I'm very, very happy that I'm a part of it, even though if you don't get paid or not. But what I do know that is that at the end of the day, we all will have peace. And when we all have peace, our children will be able to go to school. And when our children are going to school, we'll be in other countries, right? So it's like all our years that are wasted. And we will be able to recover small, and one day we will be somewhere better.
Thank you, Bifor, for your answer. I think we all resonated with that for sure, that information is one of the first steps that you should take, and proper information actually, because there's a lot of disinformation happening in many countries. I don't know, I would like to turn to Irma. Is this something that is also happening a lot in Indonesia, or do you think local initiatives have also been really supporting the good information provision?
Yeah, I think right now it's becoming quite popular, the rise of social media and easy access to internet. I think it gives us the benefit of being able to access information quickly, but also the disadvantage is fake news, hate speech, internet bullying. So I feel like before we ask people, like our other people, to be accountable of their action, we need to bear in mind that we have responsibility of everything that we share, you know, and then everything that we put in the internet and social media, we have to make sure that it's accurate, and it is also we have to check it. And with that connection also, mentioning that it's very, very easy for us to kind of like take it for granted because we live in a city, or like I live spend majority of my life in big cities. But I have to remember that when I go to rural areas, not all citizens, especially women and girls, have access to
We're on it. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. No problem. So women and girls in that village and support in terms of like understanding the digital world, you know. So how to make sure that we are actively participate in this democracy, and it is our responsibility and it's our power to direct our country, to shape our country democracy system by involving in informal conversation, engaging in public discourse, and advocating for policy, but make sure that it's not only people who live in a big city, but also equally. So
so once again, it's like adapting also to different groups with different needs, different backgrounds. Kamaran, you mentioned indeed like the inclusion of all different groups. But I mean that goes for everything. It's the rural and the city. It's different ethnic groups, religious groups. It can be gender. It can be age, of course.
A lot of people also still don't know how to read and write, and so we cannot just reach them with the newspaper. So this is also part of the inclusion. Just knowing that different education levels also plays a role. And Kamaran, I see you.
In offline world. So in an offline world, these people do not face each other. So online is the space where everyone see each other and talks to each other and face direct each other. This is where knowledge is important, and also quality information, etc. In an offline world, people go to their lives, so they know they are comfortable with their space. This is where my concerns come from, and it's not done just by individuals. It's done systematically by powerful organizations in Iraq and in the Middle East. It's where we should also support universities, educational institutions, because short-term limited training are useful for individuals. But if you want to target the entire population, it has to be the role of educational institutions, including universities and higher education organizations.
In order to reach like all different stakeholders in democracy.
We did a research in Iraq every day. Millions of content are produced by fake accounts, and we are not talking about thousands. We are talking about millions of content are produced every day. imagine that how much impact these contacts can have on people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to remind everyone, we're going really deep into conversation, but everyone online is also more than welcome to continue asking your questions. Maybe we can take one or two from there. And let me also add, if you want to speak in Arabic, you can also ask your question in Arabic and we will hear the translation in English. So don't be afraid to unmute yourself and ask your question in English or Arabic. And please tell us what initiatives maybe you've been involved in to defend local democracy. You can talk about your back home action plan after the Hague Academy, or you can talk about any other project that you've been part of. Maybe we can take a question from the Zoom and then see if we
I think
direct
there was a
it.
very important question about whether we need economic development or democracy.
Yeah, I think it was a bit more.
Yeah, I think this is very critical question.
This one, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ibrahim, you asked a question. The economic situation and capital negatively affects democracy and also the choice of people. And therefore, your question is: does economic development come first, or does democracy come first? Biford, maybe you want to kick off. What do you think?
Okay, so I think the local economic development is a part of the democracy. Yes,
So
it's a part of democracy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a part of democracy because if you have to, everybody needs to have something to do, and everybody needs to be so to understand socially they're being protected or maybe being provided for. And then when you have the local economic development process working, so that means that those who will be in need, the government is able to come up with some strategy to see how it can empower its people, right, in whatever way. So when it comes to the business, when it comes to like some initiative that they're involved with, as well, the government can help. So local economic development is a part of democracy.
Yeah.
You want to react to that?
Yeah, I think for me, how do we grow or develop our economy if we don't have democracy? Because then the economy will be controlled majority by one power. There will be a power imbalance. There will be no check and control balance. So I think democracy, we should establish democracy first, and then everything else like social justice, economic empowerment, healthcare, education could work properly.
I mean, it's a very, very difficult question to answer because if you ask someone from the Middle East, what is your, dream country or model, people point to UAE, people point to Qatar, and they are not democracies.
Yeah.
So it is a very difficult question. I would say, for me, again, it is related to my context. What is the purpose of local development? If it aim is to develop human security, and then I would say it needs to be prioritized.
Yeah.
But also in the Middle East, there is a trend to support economic development at the expense of democracy. So to stabilize the status quo, if there is a functioning economy, so people do not talk about the legitimacy of who are in power. So the purpose of local economic development for me is essential in this question.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, there is a tension sometimes, as you mentioned. Like, at first, people will probably want economic stability.
Yeah.
But also they go hand in hand, as Biford said. Yeah.
Maybe we can ask in the audience if there's someone who would like to share something related to economic development, but let's remember that we would like you to focus on anything that you've been working on or projects that you know that focus on defending democracy or defending local economic development, for example.
Iyad, do I see you raise your hand, or was that just a gesture? See, Iyad, Hamad, you want to contribute something? Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
راح احكي بالعربي. رمضان
I
كريم.
will speak in English. Ramadan Kareem, in Arabic. Ramadan Kareem for everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
I put a remark in the chat box is that democracy is the basis of loyalty, prosperity, and development. Without democracy, we can't really get the fruit of economic development. If we don't set our priorities in a democratic manner, if we don't design our policies in a democratic manner, chances are very low that we will succeed in economic development. Because otherwise, even the economic activities will be enforced top-down by an autocratic authority. So economic development without democracy is absolutely not sustainable. So for me, democracy comes first, then economic development comes later, because economic development can only thrive in a democratic system, because otherwise we could just get decisions from whoever in authority or in power, which could ruin everything. Palestine has a special case because we are a country under foreign occupation, but we also have democracy issues and challenges with our national authorities and our local authorities, not only the foreign occupation. So it's a very complex situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iyad. Before you leave, maybe we would like to ask you, have you been working on a specific project lately, maybe after your course, Local Economic Development? Can you tell us a little bit about the progress in a few sentences?
يعني لحسن الحظ انه من شهر
Yeah.
12
Fortunately, since December and also January and February, I have been assigned to be a coordinator for local economic development in my municipality in Yatta. And I have been trying to apply all the concepts I have learned in the local economic course with the Hague Academy, especially the inclusion of all community segments, and also using the tools which have been introduced in The Hague. I think I have used all of them in my work as a coordinator and focal point for local economic activities, especially in the planning phase of local economic activity. And also, I put great focus on transparency and disclosure of information to the public, and also giving them the opportunity to voice their views and their remarks about the priorities. And by the end of the year, we will evaluate this process and see how we can even improve on this
Fantastic.
to see how we can have sustainable local development in Yatta, in Palestine.
Thank you very, very, very much. Shukran for your intervention. In the interest of time, I'm going to look at Willeke. Maybe you can take up a few questions and then we...
Yeah, maybe for the
Certainly.
sake of time, I'm not going to ask you as the one who posed the question to clarify, but I'll just take them directly for the from the chat so that our guest speakers can immediately answer. Maybe if we go to the bottom, Kamaran, there was a question coming in from you. I'll read it out loud, but you can also see it, of course. Yeah, so Gerald is asking, in today's hunting for likes landscape, where socially conscious messages have downsized to hashtags and TikTok theories that overwrite the full story, how are Iraqis rewriting their democratic narratives?
Yeah, I mean, the whole concept of Iraqis is also is very problematic because of the different histories of different groups and communities in the country. So this week we have had a very very interesting discussion in the country in Iraq, whether the decision to remove Saddam Hussein 20 years ago was good for the country. So in other words, whether democracy, the introduction of democracy has been good for the country. I would say again, it means different things to different political and cultural and social communities. In a sentence, I would say there is a significant support to the contents and principles of democracy, but not maybe this positive reaction to the term of democracy, because the term itself is very political, very problematic. But then when you analyze the discourses and narratives of people, it's all about accountability, it's all about legitimacy, it's all about participation and inclusion. These are really the objectives and the principles of democracy. But the term itself has a very negative political connotation, because it is associated with what happened 20 years ago. It's associated with external intervention, Western intervention, but there is a lot of support to the contents of democracy.
Yeah. So if you break it down, then yes, there is support, but indeed the term itself is very politicized.
The protest is 3 years ago, in October 2019, I would say, were support to democracy.
Do you recognize the difficult word, like democracy being politicized as a word, but the support for the breakdown of it, or is that different in Indonesia?
Actually, this is quite an interesting question. Like, democracy is part of politics, right? Like, democracy is political agenda. Let's be honest. So, who is driving that agenda is the actors that will mostly dictate whether your democracy will be successful or not. So, I think again that's why I really encourage people to have active participations through conversations, public discourse, and then interact with each other. Next year, Indonesia will have a public election for the next president. So vote, raise your voice, ask your questions, or even if you want to run for an office, you know, even though right now political dynasty in Indonesia is still quite a trend. With a few years back, the son and son-in-law of current president won mayoral elections in 2 provinces in Indonesia. So I personally still think that it will be costly and close for people without wealth and political ties to kind of run for an office, but we never know. So I think like keep trying. If you are not involved in anything, I would say it's such a shame, because our voice holds so much power. And again, I think we have the future of democracy is in our hand.
Thank you, Irma. I think this is a wonderful wrap, basically, or starting to wrap our conversation right now. I know there are many questions on the chat. We're very sorry that we couldn't take them all. We really tried, but there's a solution. We have the Alumni Network on Facebook. So really post your questions there, then we can approve them and everybody can comment what they think is an answer to your question or your concerns. So really copy your questions and put them on the Facebook alumni page. But for now, I will thank Irma. I will ask from Biford and Cameron to maybe give us in 30 seconds, what is your conclusion in terms of how do we defend democracy? Irma just mentioned, really make sure that you participate and you raise your voices, right?
Yeah. Start small, take your baby steps. For me, look into yourself, how you can contribute through your field work, through your study, through your network. So let's take a part and changing the future of country together.
Fantastic. Cameron.
I mean, everyone is active these days, even those who are against democracy. So I think staying active in the field, I think is fundamental for me to sustain democratic initiatives in the country.
Thank you. And Biford? Perhaps he has some internet issues.
That's unfortunate.
That's a bit unfortunate, but we will give him our regards on behalf of all of you. For now, I would like to ask Cameron and Irma to perhaps step aside, and we will invite our colleague Lars, if he can join us here for the last few minutes. Thank you.
Bye.
An applause, a virtual applause for them.
Virtual applause. Let's see if we can make that work.
And here comes Lars.
Let me move that side.
Yeah.
And then
So perhaps you can further introduce.
So actually we've been talking about many different things, and what came up often is participation of citizens and also inclusion of all the different groups that exist in the country. depending on what country you are. Of course, these groups may be different, but yeah, inclusion and citizen participation has come quite often. And Lars, for this event, we have asked you if you could present a tool that can contribute to defending local democracy. I think our colleague Laura will pull up your presentation. But maybe you can start with a short introduction for those who don't know you, and then yeah, please take the floor.
Sure. My name is Lars Bielma. I'm a team manager and trainer here at the Hague Academy, and have been here for almost 9 years, working predominantly on issues around participation and inclusion. Before that, I also worked in Kosovo on the same issues. So that's a bit of my background. And yeah, you've asked me to share like a practical tool to promote citizen participation and thus promote local governance. So I'm really picking up where Irma left off with the remark: start small, start local. And I think the example I'm going to discuss, mainly geo-participation, is really about that local participation around your local neighborhood, your local public space. How can you generate like democratic participatory process about what does your street look like? How do you get to school and all things like that? So that's what I would like to discuss. And the term that they've coined is geo-participation, and it basically means participatory planning methods, practices that make use of online maps. So here it says digital map-based participatory platforms, but really they're just online maps on which you can make comments, reply to comments, things like that. I've seen them used a lot all over the world. Actually, it's getting more and more popular as a way to generate public participation. In the Netherlands, it's also been used. The municipality has experimented with it, and they actually have developed a nice kind of way of describing the different things you can do with online participation and geo-participation specifically. So what they've said is that it can be used to inform and inspire. And what that means is, because you have a digital map on a website, that means you can also use that same platform to inform your citizens about what is happening, what is the decision-making process. So basically provide transparency. And because others can see each other's comments, and you can also share other examples of how this process has worked, you can also inspire people. Oh, this has worked in the city next door, or my neighbor actually already made a comment. So it's the barrier to participation is quite low. Yeah. Also, you can share experiences. So it's very open. How do I experience my public park? How do I experience the main road that I travel on every day? What is my personal experience? You can discuss. So maybe you have a certain experience, but I have a completely different experience. So we can exchange on the platform. We can also upload ideas. So it doesn't just stay with discussing what my experience is, but how would I improve it, right? Like, if I don't like the way the street is designed right now, how can we make it better? How can I get my kids safely to school? And then there's the option of voting. So if I come up with an idea of, well, I would put a pedestrian crossing right here, well, others might disagree. Maybe that delays my trip to work. I don't know. So we can vote on that. And the option is always, if I propose an idea and we vote, and usually it's done in a traditional way with a thumbs up, then you either that should be considered more, or in some cases, municipalities have even said, well, we've selected a select number of proposals, and the one with the most votes actually will go through to financing. And that's, I put budget in red because usually budgeting is not part of the map, but ideas and that flow from this process will get funding or could be funded afterwards. And how does it work? It's very simple, and that's also why it's the power of this tool is that you just have a map, you put a pin on a location where you want to say something about, you share your views, you respond to other people's views, and you can vote by giving thumbs up. So it's super simple, and I'll just quickly show you one example. There are many of these online platforms that you can use, usually unfortunately paid. So my colleagues will pick one, and you can just see kind of what this happens. This is in the UK. And you see all the different circles. Red means that people are negative about a certain space. Green, that they're positive. Orange, neutral. So you can kind of see the different opinions about different parts of your town. And we've selected one opinion about the park, and they clearly don't like it. It's unsafe, it's untidy, poorly maintained. How could we improve? So sharing ideas, clear the area, so clean. Transform it, even like resurface the walkways, clean the area. So you get really substantive feedback here on a very concrete piece of your local environment. Which is, I think, very nice and empowering.
And it's good to see that it's not only red dots, but there's also all positive comments. So that
some people are really like, I love this part. I like the shops here. I come here to play with my kids. So
it tends to happen often that people have negative comments about everything, and then once a certain park or a certain walkway gets taken away, people get angry. So it's definitely good to say we want to keep this in as well, right?
And you also really see by reacting, so with the thumbs up, like some comments get quite a few likes, let's call it, while others don't. And also this depends on the platform, but in some platforms you can respond to it, so you get arguments about, well, I don't experience it like this. This of course has to be facilitated, but it generates, as we call, deliberation, discussion between citizens. So it's exactly as you say, sometimes people think my way of seeing this is the only way, but here you actually see the community. Just to show you that you can, I've now discussed that ideas that can be uploaded by citizens, but sometimes also what you get is the municipal. Just to you that you can uploading different options. So they'll put a pin here and they'll give you 3 options, and you can get to choose option A or option B, and the municipality might share their own arguments, or people can say, oh, what is your argument in favor? You have say 50 words to describe it. What is your argument against? So that way you also structure the discussion nicely. So that's a nice way of doing it. One last thing that I want to mention is that the use of open and closed questions. By using open questions, you really get like share your views, like really more broad sense of what people think. But by asking closed questions like positive, neutral, negative, or choose from these 3 options. What is it concerns? Mobility, like nature, etc. You can be a bit more directive and get a bit more concrete as well. So it's usually, you see in that comment box, it can be a combination of some more broad questions and then some specifics. Maybe just some reflections from what I've heard and seen a little bit is that what's nice about these platforms, well, firstly, they're not like any participatory practice. It won't solve like deeply rooted problems in your community, but it's a really nice way to involve quite a big range of people in your local space. Because from what I've seen, the number of reactions that you get on these websites, because it's quite easy to access, is quite high compared to face-to-face activities, which require people to show up, right? Clear what to do with my kids, etc. So you reach a larger number of people. And like I said in the beginning, it's also not, you immediately have the platform where you give feedback, is also where you get information about the project, how much budget is available, what's the timeline. And also after like the map closes, because after a certain time the map closes, the municipality that's the space where they will tell you, okay, these were all the comments, this is what we're going to do with them, this is the final plan, what that came out of them. So it's also a great way of communicating, actually. But yeah, as with all online tools, it really should be combined with a broader set of participation tools, especially in person, because although I think you reach more people, you still exclude some people who find these kinds of tools a bit complicated, difficult to use, or may just not have access to internet, etc. So it really needs to be combined with also like in-person activities and other forms of participation. Like if you have the map you still want to talk to the local businesses who are on that street before you decide anything. It's not enough to just have that map, right?
Mhm.
So that's important. And I wanted to mention, it's also framing and limiting device. What I mean is, by using the map, you automatically kind of push people towards talking about more spatial issues, less about social issues.
Yeah.
Also, the map is there, so you comment, I don't like this road, I do like that park. You don't invite them to completely redesign the space. I don't want this road here, I actually want the park to continue there. That's not what it invites you to do. It invites you to say, I would like a crossing here or an extra traffic light there. And of course, it suffers from the same constraints and challenges that any participation process has. That means if you ask people to do this map and then don't tell them what you're going to do with it, or you ask for people's opinion and then basically don't allocate the right budget, it will not work. If you put up a map and don't tell anybody about it, people will not comment, right? Like it's just as good a tool as the infrastructure around it. That's briefly what I wanted to mention. I have some, like, the two bottom links are two tools that you could use, and the top one is an analysis of these kinds of tools. Yeah,
That's great. Thank you very much. I think I also saw the question pop up. If we could share the link of the map, we'll share a PDF version of your presentation in the alumni group also. That's okay. Yeah, and indeed, what you said at the end made me think also of what Irma was saying earlier. Participation is not only at the beginning, asking for input what this map is about. So it's a good start of getting ideas and getting citizens involved in very specific urban planning ideas, for example. But at the same time, as you mentioned, like it also needs to follow through. Like you need to implement the ideas and like allocate budget and also report back on what you do with the input. Yeah,
definitely. And it's important to think that through before you start. So you really need to have a good idea of this is the budget, this is the type of input we want to have, and already communicate upfront what you will do with the comments and what kind of is it the plan you're working on? Is it of the entire neighborhood? Is it just fixing us some, like, more on the surface level things? You need to be open about that so that people don't get disappointed afterwards, and then you actually get into more trouble than when you begin. If you want this to build democratic kind of culture in your community, you need to deliver on when you start these processes.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe we can see if the chat there's another question that we could take on. Let's see, sharing the map about ethics of the majority. Is this something, a philosophical debate we want to get into, perhaps, or?
Well, I can.
Yeah.
Should I
please
just
go ahead.
briefly respond to this, because I think that's important to realize that and think in advance a little bit how you want to deal with that. I think you need to identify who are the different communities living in this space, and we should listen to all of them. And you will know that some communities will make more use of this type of technology than others. So it means you also need to talk to others directly. And the fact that a lot of people give a thumbs up is a good indicator that it may be a good idea. But if that, it's ultimately also a political decision, and that's the job of, in a way, policymakers and politicians to weigh different interests. If you say, well, that's a really nice, good idea for the majority of the community, but actually the people living there, the 5 houses that are there will, really suffer from this innovation. Then you need to weigh what are the interests of those 5 people more important than the interests of the rest of the community. And that's a political question. So it's not right to just put that on the participation method. All right, okay, most people said it, so it must be done. No, that's a choice that you decide to make or not. No.
It's a good way to start defending democracy, but of course you have to defend it from different sides and through different initiatives, perhaps. That being said, I think we have to thank you, Lars, very much for your time. I'm sure there might be more questions coming in. You can always, again, post them on the Alumni Network.
I think looking at the time, also gonna wrap up this first alumni event of 2023. Yeah, we also have an updated map of the map we showed earlier, showing all the countries that people are connecting from, because there have been a few more countries shared since we last showed the map. I have to say my memory is a bit vague, as in I'm not sure which countries were added, but I think Liberia, of course, before we added that one for you. Somalia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, also Burundi. Yeah, so I didn't notice the UK before, but
Yeah.
apparently.
Fantastic.
So,
Might reach. Well, we would like to thank everyone for joining us in this morning for us, afternoon for most of you. Also for those who have joined us during the start of Ramadan. We thank you very much. As we mentioned at the beginning, we recorded this whole session, and we will post it in both Arabic and English on the Alumni Network. So you can also see it, share it with all your friends and family. And we would like to ask you again to join the Alumni Network on Facebook if you're not part of it. And also that you are free to share with us ideas for the next alumni event. We can have a conversation like this, but we can also just post things on there and have kind of like a hybrid conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are maybe interested, like in sharing your story in the next alumni event, that can also, of course, very well be the case. That you have some ideas, maybe a topic you want to propose, or maybe a certain experience you want to share yourself. We do have a specific email address that you can write to for ideas like this. I think my colleague is going to put it in the chat as we speak, but it's alumni@thehagueacademy.com. So not as tricky as you might think. So please do feel free also to share your ideas for the next alumni event there. We'll keep an eye on the email box. And then, maybe let me conclude also by thanking our alumni guest speakers, Biford Online, of course, from a distance in Liberia, and Kamaran and Irma here in the room with us. Thank you very much for making the time. Also, sharing your story. We very much appreciate all the input that we get from alumni. It's also very nice to hear what everyone has been up to. So exactly. Thank you very much. I think if you click on the plus thing, that would be nice, but I'll give a small applause on everyone's behalf.
Thank you, everyone. Like Velika said, we're very grateful. Before we leave you, finally, I would like to mention that today we are celebrating our 15 years as the Hague Academy for Local Governance. So in the afternoon at 3 p.m. the Netherlands time, we will be having an event that is going to be live streamed on Zoom. So should you want to join us and follow this live event, it also takes an hour and a half. Please follow the link that my colleagues will post on the chat, and you're welcome to join us again from 3 p.m. the Netherlands time. And for now, we say goodbye. Oh, I see we have a question. If we can ask most of you or all of you, if you can show your camera, and then we're going to take a screenshot. So let's see your smiling faces, and then we can take a screenshot, and this is our group picture. So we're going to wait a few seconds.
Good for us also to see everyone's faces now.
Hey, I see a lot of new people.
Played a piece in one of our alumni events. I think the very first alumni event we launched, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Good to see you, Saeed.
I see Mohammed Ali as well there. Hello. See quite a lot of people. You can join us as well. Yeah. Let's make some space here. Let's get a student. All right. So everyone, big smiles, and we will take a picture in 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I think it's
perfect. Thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.